I recently binge-watched Wednesday on Netflix. I ended up loving the show, and two scenes that really stuck out to me was first the Monsters Everywhere sequence from episode 3 of season 1. This scene literally gives me chills. It's shot and edited so well. In the story, the main character, Wednesday, is starting to investigate what monsters are terrorizing Jericho. She narrates the scene as different characters are shown, like Tyler, Xavier, and Enid. She says monsters could be anywhere and could be anyone. This scene does a great job at establishing plot twist for later in the season, and when she says, quote, "and sometimes the monsters we least expect are the most dangerous," while Enid is on the screen, is unbelievable foreshadowing. Also, calm down, bro, the bus didn't do anything. The other sequence I really loved was the stop-motion animated sequence in episode 1 of season 2. This scene is used to show the story Ajax is telling about a boy who created a mechanical heart to save himself. Not only is this sequence amazing visually, it also does a great job of, again, telling the backstory of a character the audience is about to be introduced to. What do these sequences have in common? They were both directed by Tim Burton. The stop-motion animation has Tim's style all over it. During the making of Wednesday Season 2, this scene took 8 months to make. Tim wanted the scene to incorporate stop motion since it adds a creepy feel to the scene and also adds a fairy tale aspect to it. Tim Burton is a legend in the movie industry. Let's discover the man behind some of your favorite movies. This video is brought to you by Rogue Energy. When I'm up in my room editing, writing, or gaming, I love to have a good drink with me. It keeps me focused and relaxed. Rogue Energy is absolutely my go-to drink. It is much healthier than any other energy drink. It has 0 sugar, it is gluten-free, and paleo-friendly. They have 16 delicious flavors available like Radiant Rush, Rocket Pop, Sour Candy, Grape Popsicle, and many more. Rogue also has hydration available with flavors like Fruit Punch, Rainbow Candy, and Strawberry Bubblegum. Head on over to rogueenergy.com to get your energy or hydration drinks, starter kits, or shaker cups, and use code BBDIZ10 for 10% off your entire order. Thank you to Rogue Energy, and again, use code BBDIZ10 for 10% off your entire order. Now, let's get back to the video. Tim Burton was born on August 25th, 1958 in Burbank, California. Burbank is a very suburban place, and Tim hated growing up here. He was an introvert as a kid and lived a low-key childhood. His parents, Bill and Jean Burton, provided a troubled childhood for Tim. Bill Burton was a minor league baseball player and later worked for the Burbank Parks and Recreation Department. His mother, Jean, ran a cat-themed store called Cats Plus. Burbank is not only the movie capital of the world, it also has the picture-perfect American suburb. It's still kind of like this today, but in the 1950s, it was the perfect stereotype for the American dream. While many people who live in Burbank are fine with this lifestyle, Tim Burton was not. Tim was an introvert. He felt alienated as a child. He describes his childhood as somewhat abnormal. He convinced his parents that aliens had landed. He would rip the heads off of his toys. His house was located on the flight path of the Burbank airport, and he would lay in his backyard and watch the planes in the sky. It was also located near a graveyard. According to Tim, these are things other kids weren't doing. We can look at the short film Vincent, which Tim made in 1982, and get an idea of what Tim's childhood was like. Tim's childhood hero was Vincent Price. He could relate to Vincent Price and related heavily to the characters he saw in Price's movies. He felt like a character that was tormented. The 1982 short film Vincent is about a boy named Vincent who pretends he is Vincent Price. Vincent's mother crushes his imagination by continuing to tell him he is not the man he inspires to be. The film is narrated by Vincent Price himself. And the film ends by Vincent laying on the ground as a quote from The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe is recited. Many people, including myself, think Vincent is based on Tim's own experiences in a way as a child. Tim Burton was also very inspired by the writings of Edgar Allan Poe. Before we can talk about the films he went on to create, we need to look at the films that inspired him. As a kid, he would watch nothing but horror movies. There were 3 drive-in theaters in Burbank when he was growing up. Tim frequented the Cornell Theater since it showed cheap triple features. He would also spend hours in front of the TV as a child. His parents didn't care. He would watch classic films such as Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, The Brain That Wouldn't Die, Destroy All Monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, and Godzilla. He was never frightened by these films, even as a kid. He also loved stop-motion animated films like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts. At this point in his childhood, he began drawing. His creative ideas and artistic abilities were becoming the most important thing in his life. His parents did not support his creativity. His father wanted him to play sports. His parents were distant and didn't engage with their son as much as parents should. He left his father disappointed as he had no interest in sports and wasn't very good at sports as a kid. He also did not get along with his mother. This led Tim to leave the house to find a better living situation. At 12 years old, Tim moved in with his grandmother. His grandma was more supportive than his estranged parents. Tim always described his parents as good people. When Tim was 13 years old, he started shooting Super 8mm films. The first film he made was an adaptation of the H.G. Wells novel, The Island of Dr. Moreau, called The Island of Dr. Aghor. Little is known about this film and no footage of it has ever been released. We know it was black and white and stop motion. It is considered lost media. Tim and his friends would also create films about a wolfman and a caveman. The film about cavemen is called Prehistoric Caveman. It was made when Tim was 13 years old. It's a stop-motion film and features 2 model cavemen that had removable legs. So they just removed the legs and created the animation by having them in a sitting position or standing. Tim made these films for fun and because he was interested in animation. He didn't think it would be an option for a career to be a director or anything. Throughout grade school, Tim found himself using film as a way to get himself interested in school. In 1971, Tim needed to read a book about Harry Houdini. It was Milbourne Christopher's Houdini: The Untold Story, and give a report about it. Tim never liked to read much, so he decided to make a short film about Houdini. This film is simply called Houdini and stars Tim Burton himself as Harry Houdini. He does a trick to escape railroad tracks, and he was given an A for this assignment. He made another film for his psychology class the next year in 1972. This film shows Tim having a dream where he is attacked by a beanbag chair with Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare as the soundtrack. After living with his grandmother for a few years, Tim moved into an apartment of his own at 16. He lived here during high school. He maintained restaurant jobs to pay for rent. He would work after school. During high school, he was still very creative. He won a competition to design an anti-litter poster for the community of Burbank. Also during Christmas and Halloween, Tim made money by decorating his neighbor's windows for the Halloween season. He also illustrated and wrote a children's book called The Giant Zlig. He submitted it to Disney to see what he had to do to get a job there. They wrote him back and basically told him a simple answer: go to school. One of Tim's teachers in high school was very supportive and encouraged him to pursue art. This teacher was an art teacher and saw the potential in the drawings and sculptures Tim was making. In 1975, the California Institute of the Arts, also known as CalArts in Valencia, California, launched a new college program, the Character Animation Program. This legendary program would include several veteran Disney animators. The founders, Jack Hanna and T. He, were Disney animators themselves. Other legendary animators who became teachers there were Elmer Plumer, life drawing instructor, Bill Moore, design instructor, and Pat O'Neill, film/video instructor. Jerry Reese was the first student to be given a scholarship for the program. He served as teacher's assistant and helped set up the classes. He welcomed fellow animators such as Brad Bird, John Lasseter, John Musker, Henry Selick, Doug Leffler, Harry Sabin, and in 1976, Tim Burton. Tim had been given a scholarship to CalArts immediately after high school. He joined in the second year of the program. During his time at CalArts, Tim was taught the Disney lifestyle and philosophy. He describes his time in college like the army, a boot camp in Disney animation. For many, this would be a dream come true. The late 70s was an interesting time for Disney. The Rescuers was being released, and the company was about to enter the Dark Ages, as it's referred to. Just like today, Disney was the most respected animation studio in the world. There's always been something special about Disney. Every single detail in their movies means something, and they've created some of the most important and special characters in history. The reason Disney is so different from any other animation studio is because of its principles. Sayings like, every department is the story department, the illusion of life is the greatest magic, if you love your film, at least you know someone does, were being drilled into Tim's head. Tim called the A113 classroom home during this time. Him and his classmates felt connected because they were all creative people and people that had been deemed the weird one or the special one in their hometown because they did animation. This was the first time Tim was around people with similar interests. There were a group of students who went to go see Star Wars and were very inspired. Tim was finding inspiration in authors like Dr. Seuss and Roald Dahl. Tim was actually a puppeteer in the Muppet movie during the final scene when the camera pans away. This scene was likely shot in the spring of 1979. Tim worked hard on his animation for classes. He made a film called King and Octopus in 1979. Through the years of taking classes at CalArts, Tim's films became elaborate each year. When students made their films, they would often work late into the night before class. Some of the more challenging classes meant students would still be working on a project the night before that project was due. An agreement was made where if they were still working on it by 4 a.m., they would all go have breakfast together and then come back to class with no sleep. These low-budget short films would lead to many students landing jobs at Disney, since many of the Disney veteran animators were retiring. Also in 1979, Tim made a 2-minute animated short called Stalk of the Celery Monster. This film is about a mad doctor. Tim had completed 2 years of college. During his 3rd year, they took away his scholarship, meaning he spent almost every day in the financial aid office. Tim couldn't afford to stay for his 4th year, and wasn't sure if he would return without the scholarship. Luckily, at the end of the year when Disney representatives came to see the screenings of student films, they were impressed by Stalk of the Celery Monster and picked Tim to work at the studio. Tim would not return for his 4th year and began working for Disney in 1979. He worked for Glenn Keane and was an animator on Fox and the Hound.
I was at the farmer's market in Los Angeles and I was drawing and I go, I can't draw. And I go like, you know what? I'm going to just draw however I want. And my mind expanded. And all of a sudden, I went from not being able to draw to being able to draw in 1 minute. I felt the pressure of society and I felt the pressure of teachers. And then I finally go like, okay, I don't care. I can't do the way they want me to do it. So I'm going to do it the way I'm going to do it. Whether it works out or not, just keep to your heart and your soul. If I made good decisions, bad decisions, I just still made them based on what I felt. It's just do whatever you think, what in your heart you feel like, whether you like to write, draw, weave baskets, whatever you want to do. That's the best thing you can do to kind of do things and not worry too much about other people's likes and dislikes and what other people think of.
He was given the assignment to animate the female fox Vixie. The problem was that his style was so different from the Disney style that he couldn't replicate the Disney style. He describes his fox drawings as looking like roadkill. He just couldn't bring himself to do it. He couldn't even fake the Disney drawing style, even with cleanup animation. Because of his struggles, he was reassigned to other scenes where he would have to do faraway shots. Tim hated working for Disney. He got depressed and at times emotionally agitated. One night, early in his Disney career, there was a party at someone's house. At this house party, Tim found himself in a straitjacket. Someone had buckled him into this straitjacket, and the entire night he didn't speak. As the night went on and the music got louder and more drinks were being consumed, Tim went out to the swimming pool and started jumping on the diving board. A few people heard the thumping on the board and looked out the window to see him doing this. Thankfully, he didn't fall into the pool. He would sleep almost non-stop. He would get 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night and then come into work and sleep 2 more hours in the morning and another 2 hours in the afternoon. This was Tim's daily workday. He got really good at being able to sleep sitting straight up with a pencil in his hand. In his own words, he was, quote, very strange at that time. I could see I had problems. He indeed did have problems. He felt like he didn't know who he was and started having emotional problems. There was a time when Tim got his wisdom teeth taken out and he went back to work with his mouth bleeding. And he must have thought it was cool because he decided to freak out his coworkers and bleed throughout the hallways and on his shirt in his office. The reason he did that was because he actually had a problem with the dental work. Tim would frequently sit in the closet and not come out for hours. He did this to avoid the work he was given. He would always be found by his coworkers. Quote, you'd open up the closet and Tim would be standing there. Well, hey Tim, another rough day, huh? And he'd just glare at you. Hey, we're all going out to lunch, wanna come? And he'd just keep glaring at you. Okay, we'll see you after lunch, and you close the door and leave him there. Another time, Tim was standing in John Musker's closet office. He opened the door and saw Tim standing there, just looking at him. Somebody wondered how long he would stand in there, so they went and put a jacket over his head. An hour later, they went and checked on him, and he was still in there with the jacket over his head. He would also sit on top of his desk or below his desk. Somehow, he got enough work done to not get fired. One day, Chris Buck came into work and saw Tim perched on a shelf in his animation office. He looked like a vulture. Tim had a side to him that not many people saw. The side of him that most people saw was the performative side. I think at this time, Tim felt like he didn't belong anywhere. So in a group setting, he would act very differently than he would act at his apartment or with his close friends. With his friends, he would be himself. A sweet, creative person that was easy to hang out with and fun to hang out with, according to some of his closest friends at this time. One day, a local thrift shop received a bunch of Coors delivery shirts. Tim and his friends thought it would be funny to buy them and wear them in the studio one day. Coors Shirt Day took place in 1979. Despite being perceived as weird, Tim did have friends around the studio. In 1979, him and Jerry Reese directed a home movie together called Doctor of Doom. This home movie stars Tim Burton as Don Carlo, with Chris Buck in drag, the future director of Frozen, Harry Sabin as Rosita's father, Randy Cartwright as multiple voices, Cynthia Prince as Rosita, Brad Bird as multiple voices, and Daryl Van Sitters as the monster. Doctor of Doom was shot at Harry's apartment and was edited by Tim Burton and Jerry Reese. When making the film, Tim went to the Golden Mall in Burbank and found a sculpture of a matador and a black velvet painting. They thought it would be funny if those things were in every single scene, so they would move around to different scenes. The film is about a doctor who gets made fun of at a party, so he unleashes a monster to attack. The movie is a spoof on Mexican horror movies. The voices are intentionally out of sync, and at one point, the cameraman is fully in the shot. A masterpiece. After this fun home movie was made, Tim started making sketches for a concept called Trick or Treat. These sketches were never made into a film. Disney themselves didn't know what to do with Tim's talent, so they gave him a job as a conceptual artist for the Black Cauldron. They gave Tim a tiny upstairs office, and he would spend all day drawing creatures, witches, monsters, and things like that.
Hi, Tim. This is Tim Burton. Another one of our people here.
Eventually, Disney paired Tim up with another concept artist, Andreas Deja. Tim worked on these concepts for months before they told him, quote, Tim, we like your ideas, but Andreas is more of what we want. They ended up not using a single concept of his when the film was made. Tim worked as a conceptual artist for a few years. Most of his work wasn't included in the final films, which he didn't like, and he felt like he was trapped. When the first Chuck E. Cheese opened in Southern California in the early 80s, Jerry Reese and Harry Sabin went to check it out. They thought the animatronics were so strange and decided to bring Tim to see it. He hadn't heard of Chuck E. Cheese. At the time, it was called Pizza Time Theater, and it featured Dolly Dimples, a hippo that played keyboard. For Tim's birthday, they blindfolded him and took him to Chuck E. Cheese. They sat him next to Dolly Dimples, and when she started performing, they took the blindfold off. They all laughed as he reacted to a hippo playing piano next to him. In 1982, Tim made another home movie with Jerry Reese called Luau. This film is a fever dream. It was written, directed, and produced by Tim Burton and Jerry Reese. They also star in it along with Terry Hamada, Joe Ranft, Jay Jackson, Brian McEntee, Harry Sabin, Cynthia Prince, John Musker, Gail Musker, Sue Croyer, George Sakura, Ben Burgess, and Rick Heinrichs. This film is a spoof on surf movies. In the movie, a head terrorizes a group of surfers and a massive fight breaks out. Luau was filmed at San Elijo Beach and at a club. I've mentioned the name Jerry Reese a few times. During his time at Disney, Jerry was a good friend of Tim's. On Friday nights, Jerry and Tim would get a six-pack of beer and watch Mexican horror films like Samson in each other's apartments. Tim has cited these kind of horror movies as big inspirations to him. They would also go see movies like Glenn or Glenda in the theater. These films, directed by Ed Wood, directly inspired Tim to make the film Ed Wood years later. His friends always enjoyed hanging out with Tim, and he felt like he could be himself and not have to put on a show when with them. They would have many long conversations about life. This is why people who really know him view him as a sweet guy who had some challenges. In 1980, Jerry and Tim went on a trip to Northern California. When they were on their way back home, Jerry's car was running out of gas. His gas light had come on and his tank was very close to being empty. As exit after exit goes by, there's no gas stations. Finally, he takes an exit and suddenly they find themselves on a dirt road. By this time, it was dark out. They came up upon a shack with a screen door half on its hinges and a rusty pickup truck in its driveway. They panicked, turned around, and got the hell out of there. They were able to get back on the freeway and coast to a gas station. There was a time when Tim asked Jerry to create a picture that he would put in a holiday card to freak his family out. Tim had a mannequin in his apartment that was wearing nothing except for a see-through coat. They took a photo using double exposure to make it look like the mannequin was holding a severed Tim Burton head. There was another time when Tim, Jerry's then girlfriend, now wife, Rebecca, and a few other people went on a skiing trip to Lake Tahoe. The group took turns driving, and it was Tim's turn to drive. It was late at night, and the rest of the group went to sleep. When they woke up, they realized they were in Bakersfield, California. Tim realized he must have made a wrong turn because Bakersfield is nowhere near Lake Tahoe. On that ski trip, Rebecca taught Tim how to ski. When she was showing him, he fell down at first. But when he got back up, his back was facing downhill and he ended up skyrocketing down the hill backwards and crashed at the bottom of the hill. He wasn't hurt, thankfully. Around this time, Tim was writing a few poems. One of these poems was called The Nightmare Before Christmas. It was about a skeleton that wanted more in life. The other poem he wrote was called Vincent, about a kid who believes he is Vincent Price. Tim wrote this poem in the style of Dr. Seuss, an author he'd admired very much. This poem made its way to the head of creative development, Tom Wilhite, who felt Tim's drawings weren't being used to their full potential. He gave Tim $60,000 to produce a short film based on the Vincent poem. At this time, Tim was very close to leaving Disney. He just couldn't take any more of the mental torture. But when he was given the money to make Vincent, he decided to stay and make the film. He spent 2 months making the film. He decided to shoot it in black and white film and make it a stop-motion animation film to make the characters feel more real. Fellow animator Rick Heinrichs and stop-motion animator Steven Chiato helped Tim make the film. Like I discussed before, anyone who's seen this film can see the similarities between Vincent and its creator. They sent Vincent Price the storyboards and he agreed to narrate it. The legendary actor is described by Tim to be wonderful to work with. He understood the film and got what the character is going through. This was the start between a good friendship between Vincent Price and Tim Burton. When the film released, it ran in theaters for 2 weeks before a film called Tex. Disney wasn't sure what to do with the film. It got good reviews, but there wasn't much of a market for a 5-minute short film at the time. And given the darker themes of the film, they weren't sure if they could put it out for many kids to see. Vincent was locked away in the Disney vault without much fanfare by the company. Tim wasn't sure if he was even still employed by the company at this time. In 1983, Disney launched the Disney Channel on TV. They were looking for films to air on the channel, and Tim just so happened to have an idea for a Hansel and Gretel film. This film would have dark themes. His office was littered with sketches and storyboards for this concept. Disney allowed Tim to produce this film to be aired on the channel. Tim attributes his office as the reason Disney didn't get rid of him. He always had sketches and he felt like he didn't want to fire him in case these ideas were good. Hansel and Gretel was the first time Tim Burton worked with professional actors. He wasn't very good at talking to people about his ideas, especially actors. During the making of Hansel and Gretel, he wasn't very comfortable directing actors yet. He had done it before, but not to this degree. This film helped him a lot and taught him how to communicate his ideas to actors. He also incorporated some stop-motion animation with the help of Rick Heinrichs and Steven Chiato. A notable sequence from Hansel and Gretel that freaked people out was the gingerbread man, a scary puppet thing that forces Hansel to eat him. They used so many special effects in the film. When production wrapped on the film, Tim felt like he didn't want to direct many things going forward, unless the project was uniquely Tim's. He didn't want to be controlled by a studio anymore that either didn't know what to do with his ideas or didn't have projects that fit his style and squash his creativity. Hansel and Gretel premiered on the Disney Channel on Halloween night. It didn't air much and was quickly buried because of its dark themes. One thing about Tim is that he always has sketches, even if those sketches didn't become anything. He got into a rhythm of developing multiple things at the same time. One of these concepts became Frankenweenie. Frankenweenie is about a boy named Victor and a dog named Sparky who gets run over by a car. Victor digs up his dog and brings him back to life, similarly to Frankenstein. Tim always felt like this concept could have been more than a 30-minute short. That vision was realized in 2012 when Frankenweenie was made into a feature-length film. This version is stop motion. By the way, the small town of New Holland that's shown in the film is real, and New Holland Elementary is real. The real town doesn't have any resemblance to the one in the film, but it's interesting. Back in the 80s and 90s, Disney was doing re-releases on various classic movies of theirs. In 1984, they were re-releasing Pinocchio. To Tim's amazement, Disney agreed to make this Frankenweenie film. Shelley Duvall was cast as Susan Frankenstein, Daniel Stern as Ben Frankenstein, and Barrett Oliver as Victor Frankenstein. Sparky is played by a bull terrier. The film is interesting because it's shot in black and white and takes place in a suburban town but has gothic themes, a style that Tim Burton would be famous for. You can really see an early example of it here. Obviously, the film is a twist on the Frankenstein story. It also has some references to Frankenstein in other classic movies, like the love interest Poodle having the same hairdo as the Bride of Frankenstein. This short film got very good critical reviews and was received well around the movie industry. For some reason, Frankenweenie got a PG rating. This immediately made it impossible to be shown before Pinocchio because you can't show a PG movie before a G-rated movie. Tim was angry and confused why this happened. He asked the MPAA what he could do to get a G rating, and they told him, "There's nothing you can cut. It's just the tone." This didn't make sense to Tim, since test audiences were more scared of Pinocchio, which also has very dark themes, than Frankenweenie during screenings. After the film was given a PG rating, Disney told Tim they were never going to release Frankenweenie. Tim felt frustrated that again he made a project that wouldn't see the light of day. Tim Burton was fired by Disney in 1984 as they deemed Frankenweenie a waste of time and money. Although he no longer worked for a studio, Shelley Duvall was impressed by Tim as a director and invited him to direct an episode of her TV show, Fairy Tale Theater. In many interviews, Tim has been asked about his films being, quote, too scary for children. He brings up an interesting point. Certain elements of Disney movies and fairy tales have always been scary. After leaving Disney, Tim didn't do much of anything. He had an office in Pasadena around this time that he was developing the Nightmare Before Christmas idea in. This idea was full of sculptures of the characters, concept paintings, storyboards, and sketches. He was waiting around for a project to present itself. Also, at the same time, Paul Reubens and Warner Bros. Was looking to turn Pee Wee Herman into a movie star. To do this, he would star in his own film. There was somebody else Warner Bros. Wanted to direct the film, but Paul Reubens felt that director wasn't right for the project. He heard about Tim Burton during a party that took place on the same night as the meeting with Warner Bros. To change directors. A friend of Tim's who worked at Warner Bros., Bonnie Lee, showed Frankenweenie to others at Warner Bros. And Paul Reubens. Paul liked the film and knew right away that it was Tim's film. He remembers looking at the set and lighting in the movie and going, "This is the guy who has style and understands art direction." Paul Reubens' manager got in contact with Tim and he was on board right away with the idea. It was the easiest job he has ever gotten. In Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Pee-wee's bike gets stolen, so he goes on a quest to get his bike back. On his way to the Alamo, he encounters numerous different characters, including Large Marge, a trucker that is actually a ghost. When Tim was brought in, the script was already completed, but the story was still being boarded. Throughout Tim's career, up until this point, he storyboarded less and less of the films he was a part of. The Large Marge scene was a sequence that many weren't sure how they were going to do. Tim, with the help of Rick Heinrichs, decided to use stop-motion animation during this sequence, and wherever else they needed special effects. Tim enjoyed working on the film. He liked the character a lot and liked that he had one motivation: find his bike. He also felt that Paul Reubens was a great actor and really became the character. Not only was this Tim's first feature film, it would also be the first film Danny Elfman would score. Tim and Danny would go on to be great friends and collaborators after this film. In 1985, Danny Elfman was in a rock band called Oingo Boingo. Paul Reubens happened to be a fan of some music Danny made for his brother's film, so when they were considering composers, Paul brought up Danny Elfman. Tim was already familiar with Danny because he had gone to see Oingo Boingo many times at the Whiskey A Go-Go and other clubs around LA and enjoyed their music. They called Danny in for a meeting and showed him the film reel. He was interested but asked Tim, "Why me?" Tim replied, "I think you can do a score." This was true. Tim always liked the different instruments that Oingo Boingo had on stage and always felt that the music Danny was writing would work in a film. After the meeting, Danny went home and made a demo tape. He set the cassette to Warner Bros. And expected to not hear anything back. Luckily for Tim, they were willing to take a chance on him being a first-time director, and luckily for Danny, they were willing to take a chance and hired him. Pee-wee's Big Adventure was released in 1985. It was successful at the box office and made money, but critics hated it. It was ridiculed in reviews. Despite the bad reviews, Pee-wee made money and money talks. So this also meant that Tim became a bankable director and many studios wanted his involvement on their projects. The only problem was that he didn't like any of the scripts that were coming across his desk. So many bad comedies that lack creativity and imagination were being offered to Tim, and he ended up not doing any work for a while. Behind the scenes, he had been asked to do a Batman film. He was interested and started early development on the film. He brought in screenwriter Sam Hamm to write a script. While early development for Batman was underway, record executive David Geffen approached him and handed him a script written by Michael McDowell called Beetlejuice. The script had everything Tim was looking for. It was imaginative, ghoulish, bizarre, and had a good sense of humor throughout. There was also so much creative freedom with this project, and that's what excited Tim. When Tim agreed and was brought on board, he immediately started working on the script more with Michael McDowell. They defined the characters and shaped the world in which the movie would take place. Tim Burton always has sketches. Very quickly, Tim was able to come up with images in his head and what the set would look like, what the characters would look like. Tim originally wanted Sammy Davis Jr. to play Beetlejuice. That idea was quickly denied. David Geffen suggested Michael Keaton for the role. Tim wasn't familiar with Michael Keaton, but from the very first time they met, Tim knew he was right for the role. It was a very fun film to make, and it was a great collaborative effort to make everything work. Michael Keaton would come up with ideas like the mold around Beetlejuice's head, and Tim would come up with stuff like how Beetlejuice is electric all the time. The ideas were flowing, and risks were being taken, and that's what made the film so fun. The special effects is also what makes the film so great. While Michael was coming up with jokes for the film, Tim would show Michael how certain parts in the script would be done in the film. The cast and crew had so much fun working on that film because of all the creativity and great ideas that made that film come to life on the screen. Danny Elfman was brought in again to provide music. The score for Beetlejuice really makes the film come alive. Right before the release of the film, Warner Brothers wanted to rename the film to House Ghost. Tim hated this name, and thankfully the name wasn't changed. Beetlejuice was a hit, and proves Tim's argument with the studio that weird can be good, weird can be acceptable, and not everything in a film needs to be so blatant and literal and right in your face. With this film, Tim's style became more iconic, and Tim Burton's name became more recognizable. Beetlejuice made 1989's Batman possible, and other classics like Edward Scissorhands and Nightmare Before Christmas would later be made because of the success Tim had. This was really when Tim Burton became Tim Burton.